Hey there everybody, Eric coming at you today with another video. Today's video is one that I've been looking forward to for a while now. In my quest to put together the perfect backpacking kit, I've been looking at different shelter options, everything from my hammock setup to an ultralight net with a tarp, and at this point to an ultralight tent. Today's video is a first look and first impressions video on the Big Agnes Triangle Mountain Ultralight 3. Now in my research, trying to find information about this Triangle Mountain Ultralight 3, I found that there was not a lot of information that was readily available. So what I decided I was going to do is contact Big Agnes directly. And what they told me was that every single year, they put out a number of products that has a very limited amount of units that are produced, and that is the case with this particular tent. This was created for their 2016 line. This is one of 100 units that exist. And so I happened to get my hands on one. Basically, I was lucky enough to come across it, but at the same time, I also realized that this particular review is probably going to have a very limited audience. Yet, at the same time, I also acknowledge the fact that this is the tent that I'm going to be using moving forward, and I know a lot of people will eventually have some questions about it, so I figured I'd cover it today. And just so you're aware, this is not an episode from Dexter. Nope, this is the future Outer Limitless Studio. So I'm in the very preliminary steps of building my office and my studio. And so I figured I'd use this nice open space here to set up this tent. And so I'm going to give it a quick setup here and see what it looks like, get a first impression, and hopefully it's going to be something I find I will enjoy. So as I get into this, the first thing I'm going to do is put down a basic tarp. I also talked to Big Agnes about getting a footprint for this tent, and they explained to me that one was never made, and so I'm going to have to make my own footprint for this. I have some ideas about what I want to do. This tarp to me is a little heavier than what I'd like to carry. I mean, let's be realistic. The Triangle Mountain Ultralight 3 is a lightweight tent. It is a 3-person tent, and it's made of some very ultralight materials. And so in that regard, I want to make sure that if I consider it to be a shelter system, that the entire system is lightweight. I don't want to add an unnecessarily heavy tarp as a footprint, and now all of a sudden I'm adding weight to my total shelter system. So this is just for now something to keep down on the ground, and also a way for me to potentially measure and figure out what I'm going to need to do in order to make myself a more appropriate footprint. So really quick, as I'm setting up this tent, I'm just going to go through some of these specifications. This is a 3-season tent. It has a 3-person sleeping capacity. They consider the minimum trail weight to be 2 pounds 15 ounces. They say that the fly and pitched weight is 2 pounds 3 ounces. The packaged weight 3 pounds 5 ounces. They consider the packed size to be 5 by 19 inches. The floor dimensions, 87 by 66 inches. The floor area is 38 square feet. The vestibule area is 8.2 square feet. The peak height is 44 inches. This has 1 door. There are 3 poles made of aluminum DAC featherlight. The poles are 8.5 millimeters. The canopy is made of a no-seam mesh. The floor fabric is a PU-coated ripstop nylon, and the rain fly is a ripstop nylon. It's considered ultralight, and it's a freestanding design. Alright, so one of the things I was going to say is that this is quite an intuitive setup design. But there is a funny little nuance here, and it actually makes perfect sense. If you look at these poles, that one is significantly taller than this one. This is a little short guy. That's a tall one. I have the door set up on my side here, and so obviously I have this thing set up backwards. So right off the get-go, I made a little bit of an error. Not a big deal, easy to fix. I'm just going to flip it around, but just something to note that this particular design does have more headroom up at the door than it does down by the feet. So I can already see kind of how this is going to lay out. Okay, and so the next place I've taken just a little bit of a wrong turn. These clips here are supposed to clip up onto these little buttons, and obviously on this one I have it upside down. I did manage to get it correct on this side, luckily and by chance, but I did get it wrong on this side. So unfortunately, I need to now take my poles down once again, flip this around, and get it oriented in the proper direction. Alright, so here I have the basic tent set up. Just want to look at it with you real quick here. We'll try to catch some of these details and I'll show you up close, but real quick I just want to say, I mean, you saw me have just a couple little issues setting this up. Nothing major. You know, setting up a tent generally is not hard or difficult, but sometimes it can be a little bit tricky. And that's why I like to practice with my gear up ahead of going out on my excursions. The last thing I want to find myself is being out in a camping or backpacking situation, having to go through my gear for the first time and figuring out all these little nuances. And again, you know, just imagine showing up to your campsite and it's pouring rain, and the last thing you want to be doing is setting the tent up 2 or 3 or 4 times trying to get it exactly right. So the mistakes that I made today are mistakes that I'll never make again, and now I pretty much know exactly what to do, which direction to go, and how this thing needs to be set up. And so at this point, let's get a little bit closer look at some of these details. At just my preliminary first look and overall general first impression, this tent is really neat. I think it has an interesting shape. It looks very nice. I like the overall shape and overall appeal of the way that the poles are installed and the shape that they ultimately make. I can tell right from the get-go that once I put my rainfly on here, there's going to be a good amount of space between the poles and the actual mesh, and that's important for a couple reasons, primarily being breathability and the ability for the tent to shed the moisture that accumulates throughout the night. The next thing I'd like to focus on is the connectivity of the poles. Basically, each one of the corners has a pocket in this little plastic, I don't even know what you'd call it, but basically a connection point where these poles have a rounded knob that's set down inside. It seems to be an ample design. I hope that this survives the long haul. I could see potentially over time that could maybe loosen up, but and I'm not honestly even sure if that's something that Big Agnes regularly uses on some of their other tents. So it could very well be proven, and if you guys are watching this and are a little bit more familiar, you may be able to weigh in on that, whether or not you think that'll actually sustain the long haul. Very typical clips hold the rest of the tent onto the poles. It's pretty much the same all the way across the top from point to point and down each one of the poles. This particular cross member here is another one of the features that allows the poles basically to stand off of the tent. By doing it this way, it did not require the tent itself to have a sleeve, allowing the fly to have a separation from the actual mesh. And finally, at the end of the poles, there is another grommet that's basically holding the entire front of the tent into the vertical position. That's nice because you do gain some additional headroom, and it makes the entrance and exit of the tent that much easier. This tent has some nice lines, basically where the ripstop nylon meets the no-seam mesh, creates some little baffled areas, probably some wind protection. Yet at the same time, the rest of the mesh is going to be lightweight and also very nice for the morning wake up and a beautiful sunrise. Taking a look at the zippered entry, this is a double zipper. This track sweeps up in one general direction and bottoms out at the top of the tent. It appears as though this mesh can be easily rolled back, and it does have a little keeper to allow you to keep it rolled up and out of the way. Now, as you look along the lower portion of the tent, you'll notice that there is a bathtub design to help keep water and moisture out, keep you dry. Above that, you have that ripstop nylon, and up towards the top, plenty of no-seam mesh. Now, I'm 6'1", and right now I have my head all the way against the back wall. You'll see my feet fit with plenty of room to spare. I guess if I was 7'1", I'd be getting close, or I'd have to sleep diagonal. But this is certainly plenty of room for the typical person, and certainly enough room for 2 people. I think this is getting a little bit tight. If you get beyond 2 people, obviously a 3-person tent, in my opinion, is not necessarily meant for 3 people. But you know what? It would work for me and my kids, and definitely me and my wife if we were going to use this on a backpacking trip. So, and that is my intended purpose, and for that, I think it'll work quite nicely. So as I sit towards the front of the tent, I have more than ample headroom. I mean, basically at this point, I can sit completely straight up, and I still have about 6 inches to go before the top of the tent. So for a person my size, this works out very well, and I can totally sit straight up. And as I move further back in the tent, I can make it almost all the way to the back. At this point, I'd say I'm about 4/5 of the way towards the back of the tent, and my head's just starting to hit at this point. So in that regard, nice shape, nice size, good overall volume, pretty sweet. So you can kind of see here why there is such good headroom. First and foremost is the center of the mesh is held up by that center ridge pole. And then as you go over towards the sides, you have additional points holding these corners up, giving you a nice open head space, basically up over the top of the tent. And it really works quite well in the ability for me to sit up vertically and have a good amount of headroom. And very similarly, in the back of the tent, you can also see the center point and the 2 corners that are pretty much held up, giving the back of the tent a good ample amount of room as well. Up in the front of the tent, you do have a couple of pockets, one on each side, and what looks like going across the top, the ability to potentially add a gear loft. I'm not sure if that's for the gear loft or the Mountain Glow system. There are some points along the way in here, and I know this is a Mountain Glow compatible tent, and I'm just not familiar with how you connect that Mountain Glow system, which could potentially be these little eyelets, or that could possibly be for a gear loft. So I think that covers most of the features of the tent itself. Let me take a minute to try to get this rain fly on here, and then we'll take a look at it once I get that in place. Okay, so got the rain fly on. First and foremost, just realize obviously I have no real good effective way of tying down the front of this, so you're not going to be able to see the overall size and shape of the vestibule, but this will at least give you a little bit of an idea. I like the overall color. This is just a straight up orange. It's pretty nice, obviously bright color. Sometimes I like bright colors, other times I like to be a little bit subdued. And if you want to be subdued, this certainly is not the way to do it. But in a pinch, if you needed to get help or you had to have the ability to find your camp, this certainly would help out in that regard. Now what I start to realize is that this entire tent, I don't even know if this is like the right way of saying it, but I'm going to call it as a fully integrated system. And what I mean by that is essentially all the poles all tie in with the actual tent, and now the rainfly connects to all the same attachments that everything else does. So it's pretty much fully integrated. Now that is a pro and a con. I'm a little bit nervous long term about the plastic that's used on these things. I mean, I don't know, I'm not that familiar with Big Agnes, and I know they warranty their products. But, you know, that just comes with a pain in the neck sometimes. And so I'm a little bit nervous at the long-term ability for some of these specialty plastic pieces to hold up. You know, it's not like at this point you have a pole that goes down through a grommet. I mean, you have this specialty piece of plastic, and it's not like your tarp, or I should say your rainfly is held down, you know, with traditional stakes. At this point, it's held down with that same piece of plastic. So everything here is a completely like integral design and relies on everything functioning for this to even be able to work. Now, taking a peek up inside there, just as I had suspected, you have a good amount of space between the actual mesh of the tent, and up above it you'll see the fly. So you have a lot of potential for air movement all the way through there. Definitely a good way to help keep the moisture off and hopefully vent it out. This rainfly does have a vent that looks like you have the ability to prop it open. So that is pretty cool. I like that. That's a neat little feature. Nice breathability. Definitely a great option if you want to keep the airflow moving through the tent. The exterior zipper does have a storm flap, and going down along it, it does have Velcro to help keep it together. I can see the Velcro being helpful as you're outside of the tent, but I'm not exactly sure how you'd go about connecting it once you're inside the tent. In terms of the overall space for the vestibule, if I was to hold this kind of out where I'd have it staked out, you can sort of see what that space is going to look like. So a good amount of space underneath this front vestibule area for your pack, your shoes, or any other gear you want to stash. Now, this tent did come with some nice lightweight stakes. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them anyway. And I'm not sure, I don't think these are titanium. These must be lightweight aluminum. I have other styles and other designs of stakes, so to add a completely different design to my arsenal works out pretty well. These are nice, lightweight, and hopefully suitable to hold down the tent the way I need to. There you have it. The Big Agnes Triangle Mountain Ultralight 3. You know, this is my first look at it, my first impression. So far, it looks pretty good. I can't wait to get this thing out on the trails. I'm looking forward to it very much. I'm interested to see if I'm going to be able to make an effective footprint that both is the adequate size, the appropriate design, and ultimately a lightweight option. So guys, I'm glad you're able to take at least an intermediate look at the upcoming Outer Limitless Studio. Obviously, I have a long way to go, but it's just a little glimpse into the progress here. So I have the area completely cleared out, ready to go. And in the meantime, until I get to the next step, might as well use it for some reviews. That's what I'm going to be doing here anyway. So alright guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.